Debbie, I don't know how many times you practiced reading that, but you did a great job. You really made it come to life, even for me, and I've been reading it all week. And I have to just say, as we start, that this passage is a beautiful passage. It's one that we hear read at weddings, and we think of it as in a lot of ways, it's the biblical sort of definition of love. But as you read those 16 facets in which Paul names out what love is and what love is not, it literally felt like, somehow Paul had been reading my emails or something. I'm unnerved by how much of myself I don't find in this list, especially with the throat punch of just starting the list with love is patient, right? That's a great one to hit most any of us with. Our love should be patient. Well, when I was starting out in ministry, I figured out that there are some kinds of churches that I prefer to serve and some I don't. And one of those categories, one of the ways to parse that out is churches that, let me say it this way, churches that don't have cemeteries and churches that do have cemeteries, okay? And so one of the churches, I served two churches to start out with, just like Trent just came to us from. One had a cemetery and the other one did not. And I'm not saying this is like a universal principle, but I've heard this echo over the last 16 years of my ministry. I've heard other churches and other pastors relate and tell stories like this. What I determined is there's something about the church. Whenever there's something that becomes really, really important, that's not the main thing. When there's something that is off to the peripheral of the church, but it becomes this really, really, really big, sacred, and important thing, it can lead the church down a path that is not in its ultimate, for its ultimate best. And so one of the things that happens when a church owns a cemetery is it becomes very, very focused in on that. I mean, obviously so. You bury your loved ones there. But one day in one of my churches, the one with the cemetery, I was talking to a lady about something, and I was being rather zealful as a young pastor and very, I guess I was being rather forceful based on I don't even remember what I said, but I'll never forget what she said in response to me. And she said, "You need to watch yourself. This is not your church. This is my church. My mother and grandmother are buried right out there in that cemetery, and one day I will too." And I was so taken aback that I didn't know what to say to her. I just stood there, probably with my mouth gaped open. What I'm glad I didn't think of or say at that moment, but I have been known to say since, is these words. Well, that's interesting, because last I checked, the church is not paid for, bought, or owned by you or me. It doesn't matter what members of our family are stored in whatever catacombs or corners or plots of land. It is owned by one person. His name is Jesus. He bought it, paid for it with his blood, and that is the end of that particular story. And so I'm glad I didn't say that. That probably wouldn't have went over real well. It probably wouldn't have been real well received, but it is indeed the case. But in that little story it's a little window in on what happens when a church has property like that. We have a lot of churches that are closing, and I hear these stories and comments about churches that are closing, and the biggest question always is, what do we do with the cemetery? What about the cemetery? What about the cemetery? And that, once again, it's an important question. But when the church becomes laser focused on something off to the side and not the main thing, we're going to define what the main thing is here in just a minute. But when the church does that, the church gets kind of lost in itself. The church definitely loses its way. And so that is not a new thing. That's been going on since the very beginning. The church in Corinth went from being Paul's most favorite, most precious of children to being his problem child. And it almost happened overnight. And it happened for exactly the reason I'm talking about. They had a cemetery. No, I'm just kidding. They didn't. They got really, really laser focused, locked in on this idea of spiritual gifts. These are grace gifts. These are gifts that are not essentially given to all people, but they, through the grace of God, are imparted to some in the church. And you know this list. You know that there's the gift of knowledge or foreknowledge, the gift of wisdom, the gift of speaking in tongues. You know these gifts. You've heard of these gifts. And the problem is not necessarily that they were given gifts, but the fact that, well, they're humans. And they do what we all do. We rank everything. We rank fast food. We rank college football teams. I shudder to think it's almost that time again. We rank everything. Everything has got to be, on a list of 1 to 10. What's the best and what's the worst and what's the greatest and what's the not so great. And the church does that in Corinth with these gifts. They make this thing that is a peripheral issue, they take it and they drag it to the forefront center of the church and say, this is what it's all about. And the people that have these gifts are better than all the rest. And they should be the leaders. They should be the pinnacles. They should be the ones that we model ourselves after. And there again, that's what the church always seems to do when it gets lost in itself, is it takes something that's not the main thing. It's not Jesus. And they say, let's be like that. Let's model ourselves after that. So Paul has to correct them, and he does it through these words here in chapter 13. Hear what he says to start out. He says, I speak if I speak. If I speak. He should have said, if you speak, but he was being pastoral. He was being loving and kind. So he said, if I speak in tongues of human beings and in angels, but I don't have love, I am a clanging gong, a clashing cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, and I know all the mysteries of everything else, and if I have such complete faith that I can move mountains, but I don't have love, I am nothing. Paul is trying to get the church to wake up to the fact that taking these grace gifts, these gifts that are given to some select people, and making it the main thing is misguided. Because a way of thinking about that would be to think about a carpenter and his tools. These grace gifts, the gifts of speaking in tongues, the gifts of prophecy, the gifts of knowledge and wisdom, these are all gifts, but they are given as a tool for the work of the church, for the progression of the faith. And it would be like looking at a carpenter and thinking, well, if you would just give me your hammer, carpenter, if you would just give me your tools there, carpenter, I could do the same work you could do, right? That's how that works, right? It's not the skill of the carpenter. It's not the knowledge of the carpenter. It's not the talent and the learning, the education of the carpenter. It is just the tools, right? No. You could take the best craftsmen in this church. You could give me their tools, and not only would I probably break them, I wouldn't get anywhere close to producing the wonderfulness that they could create with those very same tools. Focus on the tool, you don't get the art. You focus on the right thing, you get something beautiful in the end. And that is where we're at in Corinth. That is what Paul is trying to get them to understand. And at the end, at the heart of all of this is what we've been going through this summer and going through this last 4 weeks, because at the heart of it is love. The church in Corinth has lost their way because they have decided to prioritize certain gifts that people get. I've said speaking in tongues, prophecy, wisdom, knowledge, teaching, all of these things are more important and should be the focal point of what we are and who we are. And Paul says, no, absolutely not. It is not that. Because if you have all of that and you don't have love, you literally have nothing. And so Paul then clarifies and defines and spells out for them almost as if they know nothing about it, what love really is. Now, over the course of these weeks, we've talked about all kinds of different words for love. These were first, a lot of people know them because of C.S. Lewis and his work on the four loves, but they were philia, which is brotherly love, eros love, which is the romantic kind of love, storge, which Trent talked about last week, which is the love in a family system, and then, of course, today is agape. And agape is this kind of love that we think of as the love that first resides and exists inside the Godhead and inside God himself. It is the love that God gives to us because it is a self-giving love. It is a self-sacrificial kind of love. It is a setting aside. It is a laying down of love. And you see that all throughout the Scriptures. God will literally look at someone and say, if you do this, this will be the outcome. And then because of his agape love, they will do the wrong thing and he will be merciful to them. That is a self-sacrificial kind of love. That is a giving kind of love. But more importantly than all of that, that is a kind of love that is made manifest and put on display for itself. This kind of love, agape love, is not something that can be hidden in the human heart. It is something that must explode on the scene. It is something that must be literally experienced. It must be felt. It must be shared. It must be demonstrated. And if it is not agape love. You can have one of those other kind of loves, and it can be well hidden in your heart. You can have a secret sort of love for another person and hide it. You can deny your storge love for your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your grandmother even. But agape love is totally different. Agape love is this love that transcends that, and as soon as it is made manifest, it must be shared and it must be demonstrated in literally holy action. And this is the love that Paul is describing here, because this is not easy. This is not what most of us think about when we talk about love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous. Love does not brag. Love isn't arrogant. It isn't rude. It doesn't seek its own advantage. I mean, thank you, God, for including that one. Wonderful. It isn't irritable, really? I mean, come on. It isn't irritable? I think my love is pretty irritable sometimes. It doesn't keep a record of complaints. It isn't happy with injustice, but it is happy with the truth. Sometimes, God, the truth is ugly. I don't want to face the truth. Love puts up with all things. Really, it puts up with all things. Let me read it again. It puts up with all things. It trusts in all things. It hopes for all things. And it endures all things. And if you've got that in spades, if you've got that locked up, please stand up, because we need to know about it so we can start following you. You're going to be teaching a Sunday school class, and we're all going to participate in it, because I would love to know how to do all that. And that is exactly the point. This is not a love that manifests itself within the human heart. It can't be done. You can't do this. I can't do this. The bishop can't do this. Not even the Pope can do this, because it's not of human nature. It is not of human ability. It is something that it must be given freely, powerfully, shared from on high. And as God shares it with this mortal coal, as the love of God is shed abroad in the human heart, Wesley says, all of a sudden, the human heart has the ability to be patient when no one else is patient. It has the ability to be kind when the entire world wants to burn the place to the ground and roast wieners over the ashes. Man, that was almost a chargeable offense. This love is not jealous. It doesn't matter what the other person's done. It does not brag. It is not insistent on its own way. It is not rude. All of a sudden, the human heart has this ability, this 10 plus ability to love in a different way, one that is transformative, one that changes not only the very heart that it resides in, but it has the ability to be shed or shared with another person and therefore affect and change their life as well. Because the love of God must be shared. It must be given out, poured out, and demonstrated to any and all people. And here's the beautiful thing. As that happens, we are transformed. We change into somebody who can love in a very, very different way. This is why we as United Methodists, we as Wesleyan people talk about this sanctifying grace that goes with us. It is the grace that is the entire house of God. It takes us an entire lifetime to experience it. And literally, it can take an entire lifetime to learn how to do it. It is this grace that allows us to begin to grow in our ability to love in a different, richer, fuller way than you and I sitting here right now in our little minds can even comprehend or imagine. Now that kind of love is one that as we experience it, we share it with our brother, our sister, our neighbor, our friend, and they begin to experience it. And as they experience it, not only does it change their life, but here's the great and glorious news. It changes everything. It changes their relationships. It changes their lives. It changes the entirety of life itself and the world around us. Praise be to God. Amen.